Mitchell has his head up, takes the feet. Oh, my! Donovan! Get that weak stuff out of here!
Welcome to the Junkyard Pod, hosted by Tony Pesta and Jackson Flickinger. You can find all of our work for Fearless Sword and Write Down Euclid in the description below. And if you want to be in our exclusive Twitter group chat, all you have to do is subscribe on YouTube, Spotify, or Apple. Send me proof, and we will add you to it. And you can hear all of our best or probably worst takes. The Cleveland Cavaliers have never been more back. Evan Mobley made his return last night after missing 6 weeks with a knee injury. And Darius Garland is set to make his return on Wednesday following a fractured jaw that held him out for roughly the same amount of time as Mobley. All the while, the Cavs continue to rattle off win after win. They are 10-1 over their last 11 games, 15-4 since December 15th. They downed the Bucks in Milwaukee, and then they took on the other hottest team in the NBA during the stretch, the LA Clippers, and dethroned them as well. Jackson, let's start off with this. What are your thoughts on last night's game? And how did Evan Mobley look in his return?
I think this was maybe the most impressive game of the season for the Cavs. And I know that may be high praise, but I think just everything that the Clippers, how good they were playing coming into this game and how they were, it seems like the Clippers are really like hitting their stride at this point. And the Cavs, they've been good, but I think it's been fair for people like Bontemps and everyone else to say that the Cavs haven't played anybody, because really during a lot of the beginning of that stretch without Mobley and Garland, they were beating up on some bad teams. Granted, it was really one-sided, but you know, they weren't beating the best teams in the league. And then you go and you up to Milwaukee, you have two really good games, you win one of them, and then you follow that up with a really good win against the Clippers. I think that's impressive. And you're getting the Clippers, they just came off of a huge win against the Celtics. They've been looking good. And, you know, the Cavs just kind of were the more physical team. The things that they have been doing a good job with kind of carried over. They were still a really good rebounding team. They still got up a bunch of threes, but they were also a great defensive team still. And that carried over with Mobley out there. Even in the limited minutes, we saw those two big lineups. The Cavs still did a great job of defending the three-point line, which is something that I think has been really underrated and not talked about enough during this Cavs recent stretch. You look at the Clippers, they shot 32% from three, only 34 threes. Both of those things are great. And when you do that, you're going to give your offense a good chance to win. So that's what I liked most about what I saw. I know that wasn't really about Mobley, but it was kind of,
we'll get to it.
Well, the Cavs did all the things that they've done well during the streak, but they added Mobley into it. So that really helped.
Yeah. It was a very inspiring win. I think mainly because when we talk about like that first Milwaukee game, well, technically the second Milwaukee game where they beat them by like 40 is the one I'm talking about.
Right.
That felt like a game where the Bucks just didn't have it. The Clippers in this game, they played really well. That was a really good back and forth game. It didn't seem like, oh, well, it's just not the Clippers tonight. No, we got, pretty close to the Clippers' best punch. Kawhi was playing out of his mind. Harden, Westbrook, like it was a really good game for both teams, and the Cavs just came out on top, which is huge for them to do. The defense, as you mentioned, is really that I felt like Mobley looked a little out of position at times. He looked like a guy who hasn't played in a while. But when him and Allen are passing people off to each other, it's just so good. It's just such elite rim protection. And when it comes to defending the three-point line, I really think one thing that has kind of a gear that has switched for this team is that they're making those secondary rotations, whether it's Wade, Strus, Mitchell, and I think this is an impact of Max Strus kind of holding them accountable because of how hard he plays every night. Like last season, I don't think we see Mitchell or anyone else in the backcourt really sprint and sell out to get to the three-point line as that secondary rotation. It's just kind of like, well, I passed my man off. Mobley's going to stop him at the rim. And, oh, shoot, now I have to run out to the three-point line and it's too late. Now those plays are just kind of happening instinctively, especially Dean Wade, who has just been playing such good basketball. He was all over the three-point line. He was doing a great job of playing help defense. And again, I do think maybe it's a little Miami Heat culture from Max Strus. I do think he is maybe one of the driving forces behind that because he does not take any BS. He does not play games. He wants to win more than anyone else out there, and I feel like maybe that's rubbed off on the Cavs.
One thing that I think is really interesting about this whole thing is kind of Donovan Mitchell's play on the defensive end. Against the Clippers, he was guarding Norman Powell a lot, and kind of the team was kind of funneling shots towards him, and Mitchell was he was doing late contests, but his job was more so to kind of like muck up the paint and kind of use his wingspan to kind of just get in passing lanes and make sure that guys like Harden and Paul George didn't get shots up. You look at Paul George, he went 3 for 11. James Harden only had 8 shots. So they really did a good job, and I know that is a lot of Dean Wade and Isaac Okoro because they were both heavily involved in both of those players. But it really speaks to in the NBA, you can't guard elite players like that with one guy. Like, it's not the 90s where there's the way the defense is set up. It's 1v1. Like, you just don't do that. It's all a team effort, and I think that's where you see the buy-in from Mitchell on that end, really just helping Isaac Okoro and Dean Wade and Jarrett Allen just kind of be the best versions of themselves.
Yeah, I know this was Mobley's first game back, but it doesn't seem like the team is relying on their world-class defenders and their world-class rim protectors and Mobley and Allen as much as they were last year. It really seems like everyone is involved now. They're playing on a string defensively, which leads me to another interesting point and an interesting difference between the Clippers and Bucks. And it's so unfortunate because I listened to the Chasedown pod today after I already did kind of my rundown for what I wanted to talk about. And they hit on so many things that I wanted to say. So I don't want to copy the Chasedown or do anything like that. But I think it's very interesting because against the Bucks, that's a very drop heavy team. And the Cavs have to play that a certain way. Against the Clippers, they're a switchy team. They have a lot of switchable defenders. And so I thought that was a really interesting dynamic. And I wanted to know from your perspective, how did the Cavs how did their approach to playing offense change in this game?
I think it was really interesting how they did it. Before the game, Ty Lue talked about how when you face somebody like Donovan Mitchell, you can't show them the same thing. So sometimes you're going to drop, sometimes you're going to switch, sometimes you're going to blitz. And I think you saw that throughout the game where the Clippers weren't really doing the same thing on back-to-back possessions with him. And he did a really good job, I thought, of getting the ball out early. I know this was 20, he had, what was it, 28 points and kind of not the best shooting night of his career.
Yeah.
But I think
he shot very poorly from deep, but he was
right,
almost perfect inside the paint. So
right. So this wasn't a game when you were watching it, or I guess if you just looked at the box score, you wouldn't say, oh yeah, Donovan Mitchell, just really a dominant game from him. But I thought this was one of his most impressive ones, just how he was able to kind of read and react really fast to how the defense was kind of shifting on the fly. And he was able to get it out to Jarrett Allen early when that's what it called for. He was able to get it to Dean Wade a lot. He had a lot of passes to Dean Wade, some that he didn't hit, but he really did a good job of just kind of reacting and doing what the defense was giving up. And that's not something that he's done in the playoffs, especially last year against the Knicks. He wasn't accepting what the Knicks were trying to throw at him. He was trying to shoot over them. He was trying to run through the double teams. Or if he did pass it out, it was way too late and the defense was already able to recover. So that's where I was just kind of really impressed with this. And this was a physical game where it was a lot of, especially the fourth quarter, it was very half court heavy. And I thought the Cavs, they weren't perfect, but it was a more perfect version of this team. It felt at the end of last year, you kind of saw teams, that a game against the Sixers really sticks out. I don't know if you remember the one where Joel Embiid should have had his sixth foul, but then they reviewed it.
Oh, so, I remember.
The half-court offense just completely fell apart in the final 5 minutes of that game. That just felt like, all right, when you were watching it, you were like, well, it was just a bad night. But then it kept happening, and then in the playoffs, it happened again. This game, it felt like this was okay. We've learned all of those lessons from that Knicks series, and we're going to start applying them here. And that's what I was most encouraged about with this game.
Those are all great points. What defensive scheme do you think they are better equipped to take on right now, the drop or the switch? Because I think last year against the Knicks, their downfall was not being able to beat that drop coverage. Whereas this year, I think they've kind of addressed a lot of those weaknesses, whether it's just Allen's growth as a playmaker and being able to do stuff above the break. You have Max Strus who can come off a dribble handoff a lot better than Jetty or Okoro standing in the corner. Like last year in that Knicks series, they just kept running into the same issue over and over again. And their only option was either, okay, they had a couple options. It was either, okay, Mitchell just has to shoot over the drop and beat it, which he had, unfortunately, a pretty poor shooting series.
Right.
Mobley has to beat his defender by either taking that mid-range shot or trying to drive into the paint. We saw how that went. Or you pass it to Okoro in the corner or Jetty, and nothing was working.
Right.
This year, they have so many more options, whether it's Mitchell seemingly adjusting to what the defense is giving him rather than running his head into the wall over and over again. The Clippers game was such a good example of that. And even the Bucks games, both of those. And then also Dean Wade is shooting the lights out this year. Max Strus is a better shooter. Sam Merrill, who didn't get to play much in this Clippers game, I think would be better suited in a Knicks series maybe. I think the Clippers are really, like, just to hit on that Sam Merrill points, I saw a lot of people talking about it. It's just a bad matchup for him. Like,
yes,
because they're such a switchy team, they were able to limit his ability to get open off of the ball. And then on the other end of the floor, you don't want him guarding Westbrook. You don't want him on Harden, Kawhi, PG. He's not a horrible defender, as we've talked about, but still in those one-on-one situations, the Clippers just had so many ways to attack him that it was rough.
Yeah, there was a couple tough series there for him. And, Sam's my guy. But there was this one play where, like, Russell Westbrook backed him down from the three-point line. And I don't think it ended up in a made basket for the Clippers, but it was just Sam was trying so hard, and, like, Russell was just pushing him back like it was nothing.
Yeah.
So it was a tough matchup for him. I think they're better equipped for both of them, both those matchups now than they were before. Obviously, Sam is better for, like, a drop coverage, but when you have guys like Donovan Mitchell, who I think can beat anybody off the dribble in a one-on-one situation, or at least you trust him to do that, I kind of like him in a switching situation more, where it's more spaced out and more, you're not
he has something to
blitzing it
work
as
with.
much. Right.
He can manipulate the defense a little more rather than having that help defender just staying home. I feel like Mitchell, he was so good last night. We'll just transition to talk about Mitchell here. He was just so fun watching as a playmaker because every time the Clippers thought they had him, he was getting into the paint, kind of freezing the entire defense, and then it was just pick your poison. I mean, he was dropping dimes to Allen. He was kicking out to the three-point line. He's been so good at just the Cavs aren't playing at a reckless speed, but Mitchell has his foot over the gas pedal at all times, and he is getting them off to the races whenever an opportunity presents itself. That's where Wade has been so good, just firing in transition above the break. It's been really fun watching Mitchell just be on alert. Like this entire stretch, he's been so alert as a playmaker, and he's been making some really, really good passes that I think, just throughout his career up to this point, before this year, he had one game of 12 or more assists. He's already had 3 this season. And I think that really shows. Of course, he's playing point guard for a long stretch here,
Right.
but I think Mitchell has really just done such a great job of elevating his teammates in a way that we haven't really seen from him in the past.
Yeah, and I think when you talk about them playing with more pace or more speed, it's not like looking at the pace numbers. It's more so they're playing with a sense of urgency on that side of the ball that I don't think they were ever playing with last year, where they're really deliberate about what they're trying to do. And if they see an opening, they're going to attack it. I think you shared the clip online where
he's
Mitchell
like
threw it to Wade.
Yeah, he's like behind half court. The Clippers
Right.
defense is set up, and he just rifles a pass. I mean, Mitchell's throwing these passes before the Bally sports camera can even cut to the player shooting the ball.
Which
sometimes.
isn't saying much.
Yeah, I know. The Bally's cameraman has some work to do, but Mitchell's putting the pressure on him.
Yes. Yeah. So yeah, that's where I think this offense has really kind of changed, because last year it just felt like so many times they were just walking it up the court and walking it into the actions that they were doing instead of getting into them quickly, because they're not like taking shots with 18 seconds on the shot clock every time. It's more so they're just maximizing their time.
Yeah, when the opportunity presents itself, they're taking advantage of it. And that all starts with Mitchell throwing those look ahead passes, which are really, I mean, you just can't jog back against this Cavs team right now with the way they're playing. Let's transition to talk about Darius Garland, who is supposed to return on Wednesday. It sounded like it was a sure thing. Now I saw Evan tweeted that he's questionable and might be a game time decision, but let's just assume he's going to be back on Wednesday.
Mobley was questionable for Monday, so
Okay.
I don't know if that's more so like a technicality, but
Yeah, it might be.
I would be pretty surprised if Darius doesn't play.
Yeah, we're just going to assume that he's going to play, if not Wednesday, then on Thursday. The question that I want to pose, because we just talked about Donovan Mitchell at point guard, what dynamic does Darius Garland bring to the table now that he will be taking that point guard position back from Donovan Mitchell?
So this type of offense really should highlight Darius's skills better than like the offense that they were running last year. An offense that is really, there's a lot more movement. There's a lot less, all right, I'm the point guard, I'm going to bring it up the court. Okay, Donovan Mitchell clear out for a pick and roll. I'll do a pick and roll. Like, it's not really like that anymore. So that should be better for Darius. Whether that is better for Darius, we still have to see, because he has had a tough start to the season. I'm not sure if his hand was an issue at the start of the season. You can definitely, if you believe it was, you could say, hey, this is why the 3-point numbers were down, and the attempts were down, and the turnovers were just up like crazy. But so I think he should be a good fit, but I'm still, with how bad the start of the season was, I'm going to wait and see before I get too excited. But this should be the best fit that he's ever had in his career with how they're currently playing.
Yeah, I agree 100% with that. We'll have to wait and see. I think it's a combination of a lot of things why he was struggling early on, from injuries to maybe just starting the year a little slow in a shooting slump, making poor decisions. The Cavs as a whole were a little discombobulated. Now this team is playing with so much chemistry and they're so connected that if Garland can insert himself into that, it might take him some time, but he is such a talented playmaker. He's such a talented scorer that this should be the best fit for him. Similar to Mobley, a lot of people are, we were so concerned about, is Mobley going to mess up their offensive style? We kind of forget that this offensive style will probably bring out the best in Mobley too. Like, we haven't seen too much of it yet, but just this faster pace, putting spacing around him, the ball is moving a lot more. He's such a good finisher down low that if you give him openings, he's really going to be able to capitalize on that. And same with Garland.
I do have one nitpick for Evan.
Okay.
And he needs to actually make contact on these screens. And I think that really hurt that second unit, because he was still kind of doing those like lazy screens where everyone knows he's not making contact with anybody and he's just kind of standing in the way. And guys like Sam Merrill, they need you to make contact on those screens for that to work. So I know this was his first game, but if we're looking at the success of some of those second units, that's something that you need. Like, Sam needs those screens, especially against a team like the Clippers, who is a switch heavy team. So maybe against the Pistons, you really don't need anything. But against good teams,
you just need some players to play 48 minutes. That's all. You'll probably get the win. Although the Pistons did win their last game, so we'll give them credit for that. But
and it costs Mobley, the Lions everything, but that's
everything.
Literally.
Mobley absolutely needs to make more contact on screens. I think that's been a problem for him dating back all the way to college, if I remember correctly, like scouting reports. It might just be his style. I think he slips a lot of screens and he just needs to make a little more contact on those. That's why hopefully, just once or twice. That's why hopefully with Allen having such this kind of a breakout as a player who can operate up there, maybe you manage to switch their roles a little bit and you have Allen doing all of that instead, but we'll see. Another question that I want to ask as far as DG's return goes, Cavs have been very, very good on defense, and really, aside from Niang and Merrill occasionally, they're putting out lineups that have like no weak points on the defensive end. I mean, you're putting out Mitchell, who's having a very good defensive season. Okoro, Wade, Allen, Strus has been very good. My question is, now that Garland is going to be out there, and I try to give him as much credit as I can for defense because he's just physically limited. I think he's a capable defender. It's just there's only so much he can do with his build. Right. What does that mean for the Cavs defense now that there is a weak point for teams to target?
What I don't want the Cavs to do is what they've done in the past, which is kind of overcompensate for Darius Garland. I think if Darius Garland's going to be your starting point guard, Darius Garland needs to not be a liability on the defensive end. And I'm not saying don't play Darius Garland, but I'm saying don't try to overcompensate where you hurt your defense in other areas by not trusting Darius Garland to do his job. So I think that's one of the things that this defense has done a better job is kind of not overreacting to when somebody gets by their guy. What we need from Darius is we don't need, we don't need all defense from Darius for this, team to work, but we do need him to compete on that end. And I think he can do that. I just think it's easier to not do that when the help is behind you and that everyone's going to just collapse anyways. And I think that's where you've seen Donovan really step up because this isn't the defender that Donovan was last year. He's really stepped up in this stretch knowing that, hey, I have to compete on this end because I'm not going to have Evan Mobley there to just clean up all my messes. So that's what I want to see from Darius. And I more so hope that the team keeps the philosophies that have made them successful right now because this defense wasn't very good at the start of the season. People forget that it was pretty mediocre for large stretches, and that's one of the reasons why they were 15-13, 13-12, whatever it was. So like Darius is fine that he doesn't need to break a defense. He's not Trae Young levels bad, and they don't need him to carry the whole offense. Like that's one of the Trae Young problems is they have no offense, so Trae Young has to do everything. Darius doesn't have to do that, but what he does need to do is when he's out on the court, you need to compete. And the Cavs have depth. Like they don't need him to play 42 minutes a night for them to be good. They just need him to compete in the minutes that he's out there.
Yeah, those are all great points. I think Garland is capable of fighting on the defensive end, and so it comes down to the defensive philosophy. It comes down to individual trust and accountability. Hopefully, as the season goes on and Garland's back up to his normal minutes, that trend holds for the Cavs because I do think they really are at their best when they kind of trust their point of attack defenders to a reasonable extent. Allen and Mobley still have to have, the ability to get over and protect the rim, which is something that they're amazing at. But you can't do it at the cost of breaking down the rest of the defense when it's not really necessary, especially those in-between shots that we'll talk about it forever, probably in the next series. Like, you really didn't need to smother Brunson on those floaters. Those are the types of shots that the defense probably would rather give up more often than not. And so you want to see the Cavs continue to play the style of defense that they're playing. And if there's anything that they learned from last season, that should be the lesson. And hopefully what we're seeing isn't just a trend, but is something that JB and the coaching staff is actually sticking into their heads.
Yeah. And one of the things that we saw from Darius at the beginning of the year is he was going under so many screens on the perimeter. And that just he was doing it lazily. And, Jarrett Allen and Evan Mobley aren't going to come up on screens to hedge. That's just not really what they do. So when he was lazily going underneath those screens, it was just, this is an open three for De'Aaron Fox off the dribble. This is, Shea can get this three. And that's what you can't have with this defense. That's what, when you watched the game yesterday, there was no times where you're like, Kawhi Leonard's getting an open three just because they set a simple screen there. And that's the kind of stuff that was happening to the Cavs at the beginning of the year. And that's where you need to see Darius kind of take more ownership of those situations.
Yeah. Yeah, you just got to run teams off the three-point line. I mean, that's really the best defenses in the NBA. You limit shots in the paint, and you do your best to run teams off the three-point line. The more shots you can force in that mid-range area, the better defense you're playing, really, because it's the least efficient shot in basketball. So
Yeah.
hopefully the
And
Cavs keep it up.
yeah. And they can't just leave the corners because that's what they did last year.
Yeah.
Just Evan
Mhm.
Evan says, I'll just leave my guy in the corner. We'll be fine. And that's that's not good.
Yeah. Yeah, it's not great. You know who wasn't being left in the corner though? Isaac Okoro.
I
17 points
mean,
in the first half of that game. He
he
was
was being
kind of
left
left in
with
the
he
corner.
was being left in
Although
the corner.
they did adjust. They did adjust and actually started defending him a little bit. James Harden was kind of out there in the corner, respecting Okoro a little bit, and we saw him have a couple good drives on closeouts and set up other people. So Isaac Okoro, all defensive campaign, we're pushing it. Just wanted to sneak that in there at the end because he's been playing very good basketball.
He has been playing very good. This stretch you are seeing how important he is and how when he's able to just he doesn't need to do a ton on the offensive side of the ball. He just needs to exist. He just needs to play basketball and be part of the offense. And when he's able to just do what he does on the defensive end. And I think after the game, Biggerstaff and Donovan, they were all talking about how he's the best point of attack defender to ever exist. And I think that's a little hyperbolic, but what he does do, no. But he really has improved on that end. And I think he's been more disruptive this year, which in the past, it felt as if he was a good on-ball defender, but he wasn't helping
A disruptor.
Right. He wasn't really helping the whole team. He felt more like a corner in football that just shuts down his guy and doesn't get any interceptions. He doesn't help in the run game. He just kind of, all right, I got my guy. He's done. That's great. But it doesn't always help the rest of the defense. And I think what Okoro is doing now is he's just really just a great team defender as well. And I think that's where the development has been.
Yeah, he's been really polishing his game on the defensive end for sure. It seems like, at least for me, it's always annoying because I would want to put together like compilations of Okoro playing great defense. But when you go back, it's like, well, he just suppresses shot attempts. Like guys just don't really attempt shots around him. So it's always impossible to find those clips. And now he's starting to be a little bit more of a disruptor. He had a really nice steal against the Clippers. Like he's really blossoming as a defender, and he's starting to, it's kind of a meme at this point that we just keep talking about him putting together some offensive skills, but he really is starting to take advantage of those little gaps in the offense. He made a great backdoor cut, attacking in transition. Like he's starting to put together these things that might be able to keep him on the floor during important games. And that's really all that matters, because if he does enough on offense to stay on the floor, well, then you're getting the best point of attack defender to ever exist.
I'm still very skeptical of him when he's playing with Mobley and Allen, and I know Mobley and Allen will always be playing together. But it's if you want him to guard a Damian Lillard or guard a Jalen Brunson, he's going to have to be playing with Allen and Mobley, and I think that's where the spacing issues are going to come, because even though they're playing a different style and stuff, when you have the same guys who have moderately improved but not totally improved, you're still going to run into those same issues. So I have my concerns about Isaac long-term or in a playoff series. But, I mean, he has been good.
Thank you for saying that.
Yeah,
I really needed to hear it.
Yeah.
And
you're welcome.
And last thing that I'll say before we end the episode here too is Dean Wade's been pretty good too. He's not at the same level on defense as Okoro, but he is shooting a career high 3.9 3-pointers a game, shooting 40%. So maybe Dean Wade will actually be helpful in the playoffs too. Who knows? The Cavs' depth has just really been shining over this last month or so.
One thing I really like about Dean Wade, yesterday he went 2 for 8 from 3. That's great.
He was just firing.
I know 2 for 8's not really that efficient, but taking 8 threes, the Dean Wade of last year would have missed his first one and said, "I'm good, guys. Like I'll just reset.
Get my steps in."
Yeah. So, and he really is a good defender. He does a good job of using his size, and he's really aggressive at the point of attack, where he's not giving his opponent any space. So I think when I look at the problems this team has, I'm still not 100% confident with the 4-5 position or the 3-4 position where Wade and Niang are currently getting minutes. But if you're taking 8 threes and you are playing good defense like he has been, you can play in a playoff series. And last year he was playing okay defense and he wasn't taking any shots, so he couldn't play. He didn't play after game 1 or 2. One of those
he
didn't
was
play
out
after.
of it.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's not going to happen again if you are taking no shots and you're also providing that good defense. Like that's what you need. That was, 6 points isn't going to make anybody super excited, but when you're taking those threes, the defense has to say, oh, this guy is what is he? He's like a 40-something% 3-point shooter from the corner. Like he's really good from the corner. So teams know this. It's on the scouting report. And when he's taking no shots in the game, the coach is like, hey, we can't leave this guy open in the corner. So that just helps everything. And last year, the Knicks did not care. Dean Wade could be anywhere. His defender, Josh Hart, had no idea where he was. Obi Toppin did not care. So that's where the improvement has come.
Yeah, we're definitely going to have to talk Cavs Knicks again. Sometimes it does seem like they're just on a collision course for this rematch. And I'm very interested to see.
I mean, in the Eastern Conference Finals.
Yeah, of course. I'm really interested to see if those two teams do face off again, how the Knicks choose to defend us. I'd assume they go back to that drop coverage because it was just so effective last year. But I think the Cavs can beat the drop this year. I feel confident in that compared to last year. And the Knicks, they can play switchable defense too. So that's something to really watch out for whenever. I don't know when their next regular season matchup is, but I would like to see how the Knicks choose to defend them. And if the Cavs are able to, because that's their kind of last year. Not only were they just had some weaknesses exploited, but they also just played well below what they were capable of. And so that's kind of that chip on their shoulder that I hope the Cavs and Knicks play again in the first round and they get an opportunity to kind of expel those demons.
I never want to talk about a Cavs Knicks matchup ever again in my life. So
I don't blame you.
You're gonna have to find somebody else to talk to that series about. But
Corey's making his return soon, so
I think it's everything the Cavs have done has been to not run into the same wall against the Knicks. And I think the rebounding, they were one of the, they did a great job rebounding last game. That's really helped them. And that's something that killed them against the Knicks. You look at the 3-point shots, they're still getting up a ton of 3-point shots. It's not necessarily that they just couldn't get up 3-point shots against the Knicks, and they didn't have anybody on the court who could take those shots. That's why Jetty was playing big minutes. That's why Danny Green got minutes. That's why, Lamar Stevens didn't get out there. That's why Isaac Okoro got pulled because they weren't taking those shots. So does that carry over to the playoffs? It's a very different setting in the playoffs, but you have to really like what you've seen, where they've grown. But what we need to see is we need to see the core four together playing this style for multiple games, for multiple weeks, for a month, before I think we can safely say the Cavs have learned their lessons and they're ready to go. Because the truth is they're not going to be playing Isaac Okoro and Dean Wade starting lineups against the Knicks. And if they do, it'd probably be a 5-game series game.
Cavs in 5, right?
Right.
I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
No, I agree. Those are all valid points. And with that being said, I think that's going to do it for this episode of the Junkyard Pod. Thank you all for listening. Please remember to subscribe. If you want to be a part of our Twitter group chat, send me a screenshot that you have subscribed either on YouTube, Apple, or Spotify, and go Cavs.
I agree. Go Cavs. Brian, join the group chat.